Welcome and thanks for joining for this week's short devotional. Really excited this week because where we're at, and by God's providence and His timing, we're discussing Psalm 98 at a time that seems very right to be discussing Psalm 98. And if you remember our last weekly devotional that we had out from Psalm 92 and 93, we looked at a life doxology, a life that sings praise to God and declares God. And really, we're going to see an aspect out of that in Psalm chapter 98. But this is a little bit different. I want to title it God's Proclaimed Salvation. Now, the setting of this psalm is very important, and as is the case for most of the psalms, there's a beginning little blurb that most people don't count as part of verse 1 of some of these psalms, but nonetheless, it is the beginning of those written messages to us to help us understand the setting. So what's the setting of Psalm chapter 98? And it says this, a psalm. It's a psalm. It's a song, if you will, and it causes a praise or a remembrance in some sort of God and His character. And so it's just a psalm. It's a song. And so we're going to look at a little bit more as to what makes it a song. And in this case here, it could be sung corporately as a group of people that have recognized what's in there, what's in this message that's there in Psalm 98. But it also can be sung individually as well. So there's both a corporate aspect to it and there's also an individual aspect to it. What we're going to see is that even the individual encourages the corporate to enjoy and worship God for what He does. And again, here specifically, as is in our title, this is about God's proclaimed salvation. We're going to see three things about God's proclaimed salvation. The first is that God revealed it, meaning He's made it known. It's because God has remembered something. Specifically, we're going to notice His promises. And then the third thing we're going to see is that it demands that we rejoice, that we celebrate. And again, what a perfect time in God's sovereignty and providence that at this moment, as we're about ready to approach Christmas, where we celebrate Christ coming to earth. And again, let's just dive into the text here and let's see what God reveals through His text. It says this in Psalm 98. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for He has done wonderful things. Some of your texts may say great things. His right hand and His holy arm have gained the victory for Him. That immediately takes me to Isaiah 59, verses 15 through 17, about how God looked and He saw that there's no one else to restore, and so He puts on His own armor and He goes to war for Himself to redeem people to Himself. That's amazing. The Lord has made known His salvation. He has revealed, so this is where we're getting part of this, He has revealed His righteousness in the sight of the nations. He has remembered His loving kindness and His faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Shout joyfully to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth and sing for joy and sing praises. Sing praises to the Lord with the lyre, and the sound of melody, with trumpets and the sound of the horn. Shout joyfully before the King, the Lord. Let the sea roar and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy before the Lord, for He is coming to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with equity. Just what a wonderful text. And again, as we're going through, if you are paying attention to the season and what we celebrate, which is the coming of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the one promised in the Old Testament, revealed in the New Testament, it's just like God picked a text for this time that we would arrive at as we're going through the book of Psalm. And again, a few things that I want to bring out. The first thing that I want to take note here of this salvation, God's proclaimed salvation, is that God revealed it. God revealed it. Not sure when this psalm was specifically written, if it was written before the exile into Babylon for the Israelites, for those of the kingdom of Judah, the southern tribe, or if it was written after. We're not totally sure. But we do know that there's many times in which God provided a salvation of sorts in the Old Testament to His people. I personally believe that this is probably after the exile, where God did bring about a salvation. There's a lot of singing, there's a lot of rejoicing. But nonetheless, we don't know the exact setting or time, but we do know that in many occasions, God provided victories. But as we consider this at this season for us, knowing that this is still relevant to us today who are God's people, we can look and we can see something that God has already made known to us and revealed to us, which is literally his salvation through Jesus Christ. In Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, we're told that the Messiah was going to come, the suffering servant, he's going to come, and his name would be Emmanuel. Born of a virgin, his name would be Emmanuel, or God with us. In other words, he's going to make known his own self to us to bring about his own salvation, again tying in to Isaiah chapter 59. And further than that, we see in Matthew 1:21 that Joseph is told that the child's name would be Jesus and that he would save his people from their sins. In other words, there's the salvation of the Lord, right? And then again in John chapter 1, verses 14 and then 17 to 18, we see that the Word, God himself, would become flesh and that he would actually display his own character among us. And the purposes would be for our salvation. So Jesus Christ, who we're celebrating the coming of, is God's revealed proclamation of salvation. And so then that leads us to the second part of Psalm 98, again having so much tied to the context of the time that we're in, even right now, is that God remembered. God remembered. He remembered promises of old. Through Jesus Christ, there's an offering that we're going to actually be talking about this Sunday at church. And so I don't want to get into it too much right now. But the salvation that God was going to offer was not just to his people, Israel, the physical nation, but just as God promised Abraham at the very beginning of removing him from Ur of the Chaldeans and taking him to a promised land that he did not yet know, God said that all the nations of the earth, that all the peoples of the earth would be blessed. That everyone would be blessed through what God was going to initiate back then and bring about and reveal now. And again, it's through Jesus Christ. Right? And so Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 is where we see that promise. But then we see in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 2, where Simeon acknowledges it in his song in Luke chapter 2, verses 29 to 32. And specifically, he mentions in there that this revealing of Jesus Christ, the bringing of Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, God with us, that it would be a light to the Gentiles, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, meaning that there would be open minds and open hearts that would be brought about because of Christ. The revealing of Christ, the remembering of God, of his desired draw to all people, not just Israel. Matter of fact, in Isaiah 49, verse 6, it reminds us that talking about his servant, who is none other than Jesus Christ, his servant, it was too small a thing in God's view to just save his people Israel, but also to be a light to the nations, to all of the nations. Again, remembering and reestablishing that his original promise to Abraham was that all of the nations of the earth would be blessed through this proclamation of salvation that God was revealing in none other than Christ himself. And that brings us to the third part of this psalm, which is that literally it's about half of this psalm is the response, and the response is praise. I will praise. Hey, everyone praise. All of creation praise. He says in verse 7, let the sea roar with all that it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. So he's saying not just the sea, not just the earth, not just the people, but literally everything should sing praise to God because he has revealed and remembered his promise that he has a desire to redeem people. And so he's made that clear by revealing his son, the proclaimed salvation of God. The proclaimed salvation of God. I'm reminded in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 4 that Paul said, rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. Why is it that I can rejoice? Why is it that we can arrive at this time? And probably in this last year, there's been a lot of difficulties in life. And you're maybe struggling to be able to celebrate with joy. But one of the things that I look at in here is that the Lord is bringing about his justice and his righteousness through the message of the gospel, which is the revealed proclamation of salvation, none other than Jesus Christ. God is bringing all of those things about. He's taking all the pains and all the struggles and everything else, and one day he will make all things new. And God is restoring. He's taking broken lives and he's restoring broken lives through this proclaimed salvation. He's taken broken situations and he's bringing about a restoring of even those things. But he's calling to people to see his proclaimed salvation and to be drawn to it and to come to him, to experience what it is to have the salvation of God that he has indeed made known. And so when we celebrate this coming week, the coming of our Messiah, the coming of Christ the Savior, Jesus, we remember him coming as a child, but just like Simeon, we understand he didn't stay a child. He came to earth, but he came with a purpose, which was to redeem you and me. I pray that this psalm is an encouragement to you at this specific time, at this specific season. God has revealed and he has remembered his promises, and he has proclaimed his salvation. And for those of us that look to him, we know that we can rejoice. I'm praying for you. I'm excited for each and every one of you. I pray that you would remember what the Lord has blessed each and every one of us with through his Son, Jesus Christ. Bye.